Good morning. What a blessing to be together. We are doing a series in and through sections of Genesis 1 to 11. The series title is Foundations, starting right by returning to the beginning. Pretty good way to start the year, I thought. Go back to the big thoughts of Genesis to see how they give us a good foundation as individuals, even as a congregation, the ways that we think and act and the aspects that we need to focus on. So this week we're talking about our divine design. We're talking about the maker's mark. The idea that God says we're made in His image. What does that mean? Who's in the image? How are we in the image? Is it all creation? Is it just some? How do we focus and apply the passage? I thought that's a pretty good image. It's not just who you are, but how you see yourself. And knowing that we have the image of God, that can be a big responsibility. As we continue our journey of starting right, we move from the cosmic to the personal. Last week we talked about God being our beginning. In the beginning, God, and He writes our story. Last week we encountered the master tuner and the priority of God's sovereignty. We learned that we are not the first cause of our lives. God is to be the one who is writing the story, making things happen. We acknowledge God as the one. But if God is the sovereign creator, what does that say about the things that He creates? Specifically, what does that say about you? As God is your creator, what does that say about you? Today's takeaway theme is starting right means rejecting the world's labels and reclaiming our identity as God's co-workers created in His very good design. To see the potential, to see the perspective of what we can be and who we are called to be as representatives of God. Imagine finding an old violin in a dusty attic. We watch a show called Repair Shop. We're probably the only family that does. It's British. But they find these old things, and then they restore them. Professionals restore them, give them back to people, give them back to their history and connection. Sometimes it's amazing the things that are found. Imagine finding an old dusty violin in an attic. It's covered with grime, the strings are snapped, the wood's scratched. To the casual observer, it looks just like junk, but to the connoisseur who wipes away the dust, takes a look at the piece and sees a maker's mark, perhaps the name Stradivarius. Does that mean anything to you? It was supposed to be impactful. Wow! That's supposed to be a good one, by the way. If you see that, don't throw it out. That's the good stuff. It's the mark. That was made by. That's what makes it different. The value of the violin is not determined by the current condition. The dust that's gathered on it is going to make sure that it doesn't operate right. It's out of tune. It sounds bad. Its value is determined solely by the hand that designed it. This morning we're looking at the maker's mark of the human soul, knowing that we're made in the image of God. That provides a solid foundation of our worth and our value. True? But who is and how are we made in the image of God? Well, today's text is a familiar text that continues to have an impact when we think about the foundational truth that it conveys. So here it is, Genesis 1, 26 to 31, page 3. We're way up in the Bible now, page 3 from page 1. Then God said, already Thursday class is like, which words are we using here? Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and the livestock, and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind. But what's the difference between that and the other things that God made? God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. He didn't just create them. Verse 28 says, God blessed them. The blessing is in what they were supposed to do, and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They'll be yours for food. And to the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the sky and the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was muy bueno, very good. And there was evening and there was morning. And which day is this? And what happens on 7? It's the end of it. Here's the culmination. Here's what it's been leading to. Getting the earth ready for, ta-da, Adam and Eve. Because Adam and Eve, unlike everything else, are in God's image. Now this is before they get kicked out of the garden. We're going to have to talk about that. But this was how it started. This was the ideal. How is the passage both familiar? Yeah, but is it still impactful? Or is this just old news? The idea of thinking about, that's how it started. This is who they were. This is the relationship that they had. Trying to put yourself back into that. There's a context to it. Genesis was written much later than it occurred. Written by Moses as they get ready to go into the promised land, to tell the people, this is who we are. This is why we're different. This is why our God is the God. And all the other stuff that you get told about other gods, it's not the same. When we connect to the wording, then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. In Scripture's opening chapter, image, Salem, marks humanity as uniquely God-reflecting. When it says image, that word has the root, has the connection of God reflecting. Like a mirror. God reflecting. Nothing else in creation is granted this dignity. Nothing else reflects God the way that humanity does. And that change in relationship leads to some change in responsibility. It's because mankind is in the image of God that he gives them both dominion, that is responsibility to rule, and stewardship, a responsibility to care for, and let them rule over the fish of the sea. But stewardship flows from that image too. They're not just to be consumers of the earth, right? Although they're of a different standard and a different class and everything else is under them, they still need to have a stewardship, a care for the environment that God has placed them into. And it's very noteworthy that even at the beginning, the wording is plural and it includes equality. Male and female, he created what? Them. Both sexes bear identical dignity, made differently, but the same God mark on both. And where our society has slipped a lot is in the sanctity. Human life, that's how much human life? All human life carries non-negotiable worth. Because the image of God is in every human that has been created. Not just the saved ones. Every human comes with God's maker's mark. All life is sanctity, has sanctity. So as we begin the year in service of God, how are you impacted by the foundation of being God-reflecting? Do you reflect God in dominion, in stewardship, in equality, in the sanctity of human life? How do you reflect God in those aspects? How do those truths impact your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions? Knowing that you have dominion, yeah, you could make your push and make other things follow you and serve you, but you have stewardship. Do we understand, connect to the equality that we have? Not just in the sexes, but among all people. We're all in His image. And is everybody valuable? Is everybody of the same ethical value? Because we're all created in the same image. How does that impact you, your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions? That's the foundation of the passage, is to see our connection to God is at the beginning. To appreciate Genesis 1:26-31, we have to look what the world was saying about humanity when Moses wrote it. It's a contrast with chaos. The surrounding ancient Near Eastern, the A&E creation myths, how did other cultures say how humanity came about? Out of chaos and into chaos. But also were created as an afterthought, because the gods were too lazy to take care of themselves. And so the purpose of humanity is to care for lazy gods. Is that what you see in Genesis 1? God created and gave dignity to humans and says, look what we made for you. That's very different. There's a biblical declaration. Genesis shatters this. Humans aren't cosmic janitors. We're a crown of creation. That's a very different way. We're not just the cleanup crew to do the work of lazy gods. Vice-regent. That's a term that isn't too familiar with me, is it? It's not a term that we use, but there's a reason for it. That is, when you can't see God, a vice-regent serves as His representative. Does that make sense? So because humanity can't see God, when they look at humans, they should see representatives who have authority because we represent God. So it's a term that I've left in, even though that we don't necessarily connect well with it. So I've replaced that in a way with the word co-workers. But a co-worker isn't quite the same as a vice-regent, because a vice-regent says, we're representatives of the king. God uses royal language to be made in the image of God. Means we're God's vice-regents, His representatives on earth, commissioned to have dominion, both control over and stewardship, take care of humanity, one another, creation, the world, on His behalf. Not that God is distant and disconnected and not doing anything, but He's like, look at all of the humans here that should be doing what I do. And at work, co-workers with God. Any family resemblance there? In the ancient world, a king would set up an image, a statue of himself in a far-off province to signal his sovereignty. And people would bow to that image or worship to that image so that they knew who that they were serving. We are the living statues. Isn't that kind of a, not that we're to be worshipped or sacrificed to, but when people see one another, we should say, oh, you represent God? Oh, I see a little bit of that in you. And that image reflects together. In the New Testament, this office of vice-regent is elevated from mere representation to family relationship. And then he moves from, you're not just a vice-regent, but you are heirs with. You have an inheritance from. We are now in the New Testament, because of the life, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, children of the King. We're not just employees, we're heirs. Romans 8:16 and 17 tells us, the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. Not just representatives of a king, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ. So in Jesus, that connection changes over, not just as a human one, but as being co-equal children. Representatives, but also ambassadors. As vice-regents, we represent the king's interests. In 2 Corinthians 5:20, it states, therefore we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. That legal standing of being an ambassador. And how do we do that? Just in royal functions? No, also in ordinary life. Our vice-regency extends to every action. Colossians 3:17 commands, and whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus. Not just in his name, but representing his name. It has two sides to that. Not just under his authority, but also because we are a reflection. But who's the perfect image? Getting back to what God intended in creation, Jesus is the perfect image. We can't understand our design without looking at the one who restored it. He's the perfect vice-regent. While the first Adam failed his commission, did he not? Sin entering the world says that's not how God would do it. That's not a good representation. That's not a good reflection. But Colossians 1:15 tells us that Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Now that helps me because it moves it to Greek instead of Hebrew. Image here is exact representation. Like a stamp, like a in wax stamp. Jesus isn't a reflection of God. He is the exact representation of God. That's a great concept. He is the exact imprint of his nature. Not just he's a good reflection. No, he is exact. And he's also our restorer. Just as the Spirit hovered over the void in Genesis 1:2, Jesus walks into the void of broken humanity to restore the Maker's mark. Through him, we're not just repaired, we are a new creation. How many times did Jesus interact with people and remind them of their value to God and their responsibility to one another? And he lived it, and he showed it. We can get messed up, challenged, when the labels that we accept aren't labels from God, but from society. In the counseling room, one of the greatest battles is often over identity. People don't know who they're supposed to be, especially when they don't know who they're supposed to be in what environments with what people. We spend our lives wearing labels that the world or our past or failures have slapped on us, and we think that the label is permanent. I will always be. I can never get rid of. The labels of the world we often identify as the failure, the addict, or, oh, you're that person. Or you did that, or you didn't do that. We start to believe the dust on the violin is who we actually are. We look at the flaw instead of the maker mark. Starting right means intentionally rejecting the world's labels and accepting God's very good design. There might be accountability. There might be I need to learn things differently. I might need to behave differently. But it comes from, as a reflection of God, he can make my life different. And that's a good way to look at it. If you truly believed you were the image bearer or representative of God, how would that change your internal monologue? We're going to talk about the two ways. Do you think of yourself in this way? Would you speak to yourself the way that you speak to a masterpiece of God? Do you remind yourself of your value towards God, or what labels do you put internally? How would the same truths impact your desire to invite others to be adopted into the royal family through baptism so we all receive the same inheritance? If you see yourself in reflection of what God has done, even though it shows your imperfections, does it also encourage you to invite other imperfect people to a perfect God? Yeah. Not because your life is perfect, but because His was. Who do you know that needs the gospel message, and how can you share the invite with them? Because there's different ways to share it. But who do you know that needs it, and what ways can you share it? Sometimes people need the example. Sometimes they need the service, the ministry, the care, the compassion. Sometimes it's direct Bible study. But there's different ways to share the same. God sees you, God made you. Jesus didn't just know the image of God theologically, He practiced it relationally. When Jesus touched the leper in Mark 1:41, He wasn't seeing a disease, He was seeing a marred image bearer in need of restoration. Isn't that cool? He's seeing somebody that's like, that wasn't the plan. If we'd all stayed in the garden, you wouldn't be going through this. The other side of it, internal monologue, dealing with difficult people. We're going to call them a difficult neighbor. How does the image of God change how you view your difficult neighbor? How do you see other people? Are there people that you don't necessarily think of are as a good representation of the image of God? Well, it requires the Spirit of God to see the Maker's mark in the person who frustrates you. All of humanity is made in the image of God, and we may need to be reminded to treat one another with the respect and the honor of that connection they have with God. They are God's image too. Flawed differently, but there's still something of value in everyone. That's a good centering thought. So this week, with the monologue question, this week when you look at the mirror, face a failure, will you listen to the dust of your current condition or the mark of the creation? Are you going to look at the flaw, or are you going to look at the Maker? When you're talking to yourself, focus on your strengths or weaknesses, but that's still you. Or focus on who made you. That's a good foundation. And the neighbor question. Identify one person you struggle to respect, or value, or honor. How does knowing that they're an image bearer change your approach to them this week? We don't want anyone to be lost. True? Mm-hmm. That means anyone. How can you help them know God and the church family better? It's important. So how does this take root? How does this move on? What's the blessing here? May you go forth knowing that you're not a mistake or a slave of your past. May the God who declared His creation very good remind you of your dignity today. And may you walk as a child of a king and a co-worker of God in His kingdom. Can you say amen to that? Amen. Can you be encouraged to live that way this week and to see the value in others? Talk to yourself better, treat others better, because we're all in the image of God. Next week you can come if you want. It's a sermon for me. So, well, mostly for me. Anyways, it's a sermon for me on a topic that's not natural for me, but I've seen some improvement. We're talking about you would know. Sabbath rest. Am I a good rester? No, I am not. I have gotten better at taking time to rest, but it is certainly not my instinct. Why is that a foundation of how God made us? I like this. God didn't just rest because he was tired. He rests to enjoy. He sanctified. He set apart time to say, take time, honor time, before he set apart a tabernacle, before he even set apart a people. He said, I, God, give you time to honor me. So, if that's a message that would help you, come and join me, and we'll go through it together. Thank you for your time and attention.